Hey folks, welcome to Bear Mountain. Today we're just kind of focusing in on some, I guess we're kind of approaching mid-fall now, and what we're doing is we're putting the summer garden to bed for the season, and kind of wanted to show you what we're doing with cover cropping. We're kind of trying to apply our compost in a more measured manner than before. We used to use a lot of compost on the beds. We'd come in after we crop things out for the season. We would apply like a ½ inch to an inch of urban waste compost over these beds. And this bed here that you're looking at was formerly green beans. And what we're doing is we're going to be using cover crops on these beds through the worst part of winter. And then as we approach March of next year and get ready to start putting things in, we'll be knocking this cover crop down and occultating it basically to kill it off. Okay, so for cover crop, what we're using is a variety of different types of legumes as well as grasses. So what we're doing is we're using the taller material you may see, like this guy sprouting right here. This is cereal rye, and it germinates really well in cooler soil temperatures that we're now beginning to experience. It can germinate in soils that are as low as down into 40 degrees, and it'll still germinate. We're also put in hairy vetch, which is just beginning to germinate. There really isn't too many examples of it in here, but a lot of the other things that you may be seeing in here are clovers. We put in some crimson clover and some Dutch white clover, as well as I added in Oregon annual ryegrass, which is also now just beginning to germinate. The only thing I didn't have in my mix was a brassica, and I'm thinking I probably should have added a mustard or perhaps like a daikon or something like that. But I was using basically seed that I had extra left over from last year, so this seed was still pretty good, and it's now things are beginning to germinate pretty good, and within probably a couple more weeks this will be a nice green carpet of grasses and clover growing in it. We've also got, you may notice, some things like this over here is a little volunteer potato, and that's from a potato that didn't get harvested. That's actually probably its second year. I never quite get all the little spuds out, but as soon as frost hits, that will basically die back. And the rest of these things are hardy to a degree for freezing temperatures. I mean, they can take it down into the low 20s, and they probably won't be hurt. In our climate, that works out pretty well. So again, this material is going to grow. It's going to put root mass into the soil, and we'll let it grow until, like I said, about early March, and then we'll knock it down. And then at that point, after we finish with the occultation, the last step will be we'll pull that tarp back and we'll apply compost just as a top dressing at that point, and be able to plant right into things. And we should have a good amount of organic material on the bed at that point. So we're doing this with a number of beds that we're not putting any kind of winter crop on. As an example, we have a bed over here, as we'll walk around and show you our garlic that was planted in the first part of October, that was planted in a buckwheat cover crop, and it's starting to do pretty well. We're also going to need some beds for greens and radishes and things like that we'll plant, and we'll be using our hoop system here to give it some plastic cover if we need to kind of protect it from the harshest things of wintertime.
Question.
Yep.
We're going to have some really low temperatures next week. At least that's what they're forecasting, in the mid-20s. Mm-hmm. Is this established enough that it will make it?
Yeah, my experience with this stuff is it doesn't really matter. It doesn't hurt it. It just slows it down.
Okay.
But you know, our winters are kind of like this. We'll get this little burst of like, oh, we get really cold nights, and then it just goes back into like 50s in the day, or high 40s in the day, and maybe down into the 30s at night. Not freezing every night, so it's not a constant. We don't freeze out like, you know, oh, the soil's going to freeze down 6 inches and it's going to stay that way until, you know, thaw. We tend to go up and down, up and down, up and down. So what happens with these guys is during a cold spell, they just slow down. And then when it warms back up, they grow more. So we can get, after this like first round of what we'd say would be nighttime freezing temperatures and maybe, you know, fairly cool days for us, it can go right back into, well, we'll get a spat of warm rain off the Pacific Ocean, warmish, and the days will be maybe low 50 and night times will be down to 40, 45 because we're getting that warmer coastal influence. And that during those types of period of times, which can go for several weeks at a time, this stuff will continue to grow. So it's not going to be, when we put the tarp on it in March, it's not going to be like you would think a cover crop would look like in May, where you got this super tall stuff. We're going to be talking about something that's going to be, you know, like a hairy turf size. And did we get the maximum, nitrogen fixation and that sort of thing? And the answer is no. What we're really trying to do is just get a cover on the soil, protect it through the worst of the winter, and get some biomass on the top, not a huge amount, and then we're going to supplement that with the compost.
How does it protect the top, like from rain?
Yeah, because as this thing fills in with vegetation, the impact of the rain falling is going to hit the plant before it's going to hit the soil. So this will be, just like falling on a yard almost, in a sense. I mean, it's not going to look like a yard, but it's going to be that kind of thing where. So it'll prevent erosion and, compaction from the rain itself. So let's go over and take a look at our garlic. Okay, this bed of garlic was planted right around, I'd say somewhere between the 8th and the 10th of October. And right around the 2nd of October, we had a buckwheat crop in here that was flowering and was about almost 2 feet tall. We came in and basically I chopped the buckwheat crop down and left it on the ground itself. And as you can tell, today's the 3rd of November, and the buckwheat material is decomposing rapidly. And our garlic is now, has been germinated now for almost 2 weeks. And so it came, well, not quite 2 weeks. I'd say more like about a week. Because it came up really pretty fast. When we planted the little cloves, they didn't take long to germinate at all.
What type of garlic?
Now, I knew people would ask that because I did a big no-no, because we were really late on looking for garlic to plant in the garden. So we couldn't get any seed garlic. So this is not official seed garlic. And I know people say, oh my God, you cannot plant store-bought garlic. You might be introducing disease. And this is a hardneck garlic that was organically grown by some local growers in our area, and it's I think, I'm not really sure what the name of it is. I think it's like a German, it's got German in the name. I'm not exactly certain, but I do know it's a hardneck garlic, and it's actually got pretty good flavor. So we just took those extra cloves of organic and planted in here. So the bed itself has, we've got approximately, in this bed, it's 4 foot wide by a little over 9 feet long, and it's got approximately about 90 plants in here. And they're all kind of spaced about 6 inches apart, so they should grow pretty well. And you can see that the buckwheat did a really good job of suppressing fall weeds. So, but it doesn't do very good at keeping cats from sitting on your bed.
We're tormenting you while you're filming. Sorry for the shaky camera. The cats are attacking me.
So what we've got here is this will be pretty good. It'll just go like this for the rest of the winter. If we get into any kind of weed situation, we'll just kind of pull them out. But I think they're pretty well established for starters. And I think the last thing I just wanted to show was our sweet potato beds. We harvested our sweet potatoes, I think it was about 10 days ago. And immediately after we harvested, we also planted cover crop on that. So let's go over and take a look and see how those guys are doing over there. Okay, this is the next area we're cleaning out of the garden. What you're seeing in front of you right here is the sweet potato bed. Now, digging up potatoes or sweet potatoes is you actually do have to dig. And so there is quite a bit of fair amount of soil disturbance. So what I did is after we took off the potatoes, and there's some example of some stuff we're kind of letting the vine, it got into our bird netting, and it's, you know, if anybody's dealt with bird netting and plant material getting into it, it becomes an absolute nightmare. So we're kind of letting that sweet potato vine stuff kind of rot down a little bit, and then I can get the netting off of it. But we pulled all that off, dug the potatoes, and we had a pretty good harvest this year. Not as good as last year, but it was still pretty good. And it was about 25 pounds well, it's probably more than that. At least probably closer to 40 pounds between the two beds.
But this was not a good potato year.
No, they didn't get as big because we got them in much later than we did the year before. We were off by about 3 or 4 weeks.
But the other potatoes weren't great either.
No, well, that had a different issue. That was attacked by the nutria, so we ended up with not doing as well on our potatoes as we'd hoped. But we planted these beds immediately after I pulled this stuff off, same day. I planted in the same mix of cover crop that we did on the bean bed. And so these beds are maybe not quite a week behind the bean beds, but they're germinating really well here too. The fall rains have done an excellent job keeping things nice and moist. We're just going to leave the drip lines here on this because what we're going to do again when we finish come in March, we're going to tarp this down, so the drip lines will be in place and we won't have to worry about them at all. This is a really durable microline tubing, so it doesn't have any problems going through the winter time. There's no water in them. They're not going to split or anything like that, so it's pretty good shape. Now behind us here, as we're taking out the tomato arbor, these tomatoes did really well. We had about 24 plants in here, of which 23 of them were either slicing or paste tomatoes.
Mostly paste.
A lot of paste because we were aiming to put a lot of it up, and we put up we got well close to 200 pounds of tomatoes off of these guys, which again, these were late planted too. So these, because we had such a cool wet spring, and they actually did pretty well. I got some green ones left on there. I may pick a few off just for the heck of it, but for the most part, it produced pretty well, and I'm kind of in the process of just cleaning them out and throwing them in the compost heap. Do have some cherry tomatoes that are left out over there on the end, and we'll kind of just be using those to snack on. We already dried probably about at least 10 to 15 pounds of dried or cherry tomatoes that we dried, and ended up getting quite a bit of those. We use those in like sauces and things like that because you can grind them up.
We've done everything with the tomatoes. We even took the skins and dried it.
Yeah, and that worked really well too for a thickening agent for your sauces. And we made a whole bunch of ketchup, at least I think it was about 4 gallons of ketchup, which is something when you consider, you know, you have to reduce tomatoes down and reduce them down and reduce them down, and we still ended up with about 4 gallons of ketchup. So that's pretty cool. So yeah, it did really well.
It's gonna be tasty.
Yep. So that's kind of it. You know, we're just kind of, as we go and we clean things off, I can keep planting this cover crop mix because it's really suited for cool. I'll do the same thing over here when I'm finished with that this week. And so the beds that are gonna have nothing on them during the winter time will have a cover crop on them, and then the others we'll use to plant cool season stuff as we go through. We can keep planting in our climate pretty much up until first part of December, and then we can pick up again under cloche, you know, lettuces and cool season things. We can pick that up again usually by near the end of January. So it's only about a 2-month period of time that we can't plant something in the garden itself. So any thoughts?
No.
Looks like a mess, huh?
Well, no, actually it's looking fairly good for the cleanup. There's weeds and stuff in the path and some of the beds we haven't tackled yet. But
Yep.
we've, right between all the harvesting and processing of preserving food, you add cleanup to it too on the garden, and you know, you're still busy.
Yeah, it keeps you busy.
Yeah, so I think it looks pretty good. Just got visions for next year. I really didn't think these tomatoes would produce that well.
Yeah, because we actually didn't get them in the ground till almost the last week of June.
Yeah,
And that was probably
so
about
late.
Yeah, it's clearly almost 4 weeks later than normal. But luckily we were blessed with a really warm fall. I mean, it stayed in the 80s all the way through, almost to the last week of October. You know,
it's
just
only now that it's really cool.
Yeah, it's gone to what you consider normal at this point. So
back to the little gloves and hats with covering ears.
Yep. So anyway, folks, we just want to kind of show you some of the dull things that you have to do near the end of the season, and how we're trying to figure out our way through and adapting with a lot less compost since we're not purchasing any compost. So this is going to be our first year of how do we do no dig without a big huge supply of purchased compost, and so far we'll see how that rolls.
Yeah.
So.
But what we're doing now is real important for how soon we get in the spring.
Yeah. Yeah, we want to eliminate as much compaction as possible, or erosion, or impacts from rainfall and stuff like that, by having something growing here. If it's not something we can eat, it's something that will add biomass to the soil. So I want to thank you guys for watching this time, and as always, stay safe out there, and we'll catch you on the next video. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.